see that.
Okay, so the very first thing we did, and it's probably really important now in a context, but this was way before coronavirus, was that we gave the students exposure to Mahara before they came anywhere near the institution. We had pages that were either available publicly or through a secret URL. This one here is the Big Vet Wee Vet page. This was produced by our existing students as an orientation guide for incoming new first year students. So I helped them put together the structure of this, and they filled in the content so that when students were looking for information about, I'm traveling from Portugal, can I bring my pet dog with me? There was content here for them. There was information about what shops to expect, how to get about in Glasgow, what to do about accommodation, all the sort of essential information that the students are going to be looking for. So this was all made available to the students so we could send it out weeks before they actually matriculated and got signed into our systems, which meant that the students could actually start to digest all of the generic orientation stuff before they came to us. And it also meant that they actually saw Mahara, and their first impression of it was, this is a useful place to go to get information, rather than, why am I being shown this? So it gave them a much more positive mindset when they first started. Okay, so that was the Big Vet Wee Vet site. So that was the very first impression that the students had of the site. So roll on a bit of time, they join their program. So the work that I'm actually talking about here is from my previous role, where I was working with the vet school at University of Glasgow. I've now moved into the College of Arts, where I'm looking after a number of schools there in terms of learning technologies. But this is what I did for 7 years, so it's content that I've got a lot of experience with. So this was our program common room. This was shared between all 5 years of the program. And this was the most recent version of it that I set up, so that it had very carefully controlled access to certain areas. So the students only saw the bits that were relevant to their year group, and they got all the generic useful resources as well, so that we only needed to put them in one place, rather than having to post them into multiple places and risk version issues every time somebody shared a document. Within here is the first demonstration of the deep links. So I've got links here that go to pages on Mahara. And rather than taking them to the Mahara login page, fingers crossed because I'm doing this live, this should drop you straight into the correct page. It does, it works. So this means that we can actually put in links in Moodle that take you through and automatically sign you in and deliver you to a specific resource on Mahara. From here, you can see why we use Mahara is because it's much more visual than putting things into Moodle. So if I click into one of these subject areas, you can see that I've then embedded a whole series of videos that the students can then be directed to as and when. Oh, there's the disaster. The video is unavailable. Assuming this was working, that would then take you to the video. There we go. Right, there must be something wrong with that particular one video. And they can obviously full screen that. Okay, so this allowed us to really rethink how we could flip as much of the students' learning as possible, so that when they came to do a practical session, they would expect to go and look at the relevant videos in advance, which meant that they could prepare and turn up on the day ready to actually demonstrate the skills, rather than having to waste the first 15-20 minutes of a session where someone goes through point by point exactly what the procedure is that they're supposed to be doing. To a large extent, that worked well. It took a long time to get buy-in with the clinical staff. so that if the student turned up and didn't have a clue because they'd obviously not watched the video, that they actually should be doing something about that and encouraging the students to prepare in advance. And it also meant that we could send the students off anytime they wanted to recap and refresh a particular skill. There was a whole bank of resources that they could actually access. So I'm going to come back out from there. So that was within our common room area, so that the students all had access to this material whenever they wanted. However, there was so much material there that you actually have to put it into a context for them. And the way that we delivered that was within the actual courses. As I scroll down, we give them a context and a set of resources. So, for example, here we have the clinical reasoning task and a link to the activity that they're expected to do. So this then takes them through over to Mahara again. They've had instructions for what they're supposed to do. Here they have a case where an animal comes into a veterinary clinic with certain symptoms, and then they have a series of questions to answer about it. So all our students are expected to do is to take a copy of the page and then edit it within their own personal portfolio, which then they can showcase back to us later to show they've understood the issues and the implications for the animal. And it also means that they have that as a reference material for revision later on, because potentially they could be asked examination questions about this particular topic. So very much Mahara was then used not just as a portfolio tool, but as a learning tool where the student did a lot of the reflection and where they built up their own experience and bank of resources that they could use for improving their learning. Within each of the courses, we had the same, my mouse has just gone funny, here we go, the same sort of layout within each of the sections. So for example, here we've got a quiz, a file, but within the blood sampling practical, they are actually expected to go and look at some videos. So again, from there, in a specific context, they're going to a specific page to watch the videos that are relevant to that particular subject, which they will then do a practical on a couple of days later. I'm not going to play those ones because not everybody likes the sight of blood. So moving on swiftly. The other thing that Mahara allowed us to do was to build up banks of resources so that year on year, we continued to get more and more useful content as we went along. So I'm just going to jump into this course here to get the link. So here we have the post-mortem room. They, on a regular basis, would, every time the students come in for a practical class on post-mortem where they would examine a completely new animal each week, they would record it, they would make a series of images or videos of the actual process of working through from finding the cadaver of the animal through to actually identifying what was wrong with it and why it had died. And within each of those, we then have a whole series of resources that the students can review and look at. And this goes back over 5 years now. So that becomes a massive, massive collection of archive resources that students can dip into if they want to take their learning further and investigate individual particular cases or particular diseases that they actually want to see more information about. So this is really, to my mind, showcasing that everything that we do on Moodle can be directly supported by the resources that we have on Mahara, which then eventually leads into the students actually developing their portfolios. We have students submitting their portfolios on a yearly basis, and they get feedback on it. And in years 1, 3, and 5, they actually get graded feedback on it. so that in years 2 and 4 they get a lot of feedback in terms of what they need to do to improve that, to move forward within the programme. Within the templates, they get a link within their course to copy over these template pages. Now, those of you who've used templates will be familiar with the concept. What we do is we give them a blank template with all the key headings that we want them to fill in, and some red text where we want them to read the instructions and then delete that afterwards. We also, in this case, gave them a picture that they will feel motivated to change, because we want them to put their own picture in there, because this is their personal portfolio of the experience that they've built up over a number of years. So what they do is they simply take a copy of the entire portfolio and edit it to their own requirements, and then they come back, once they've done that, into Moodle. And if I go back to the common room, within here we have a section for the portfolio, which the students can then submit to as a Moodle assignment activity. Now, that was an absolute whirlwind. I am now going to end the screen sharing and invite any questions. And I can always come back in and share screen again if people have specific things they'd like to see.
Wow, thank you, Gordon. And can I just say that the work on deep links and integrating it inspired me when I was at Cranfield, and I think all of my academic colleagues at Cranfield got a bit overwhelmed when I said, right, I know how to make this even better, and they had deep links all over their course pages. So thank you for that. There are a lot of comments. I don't know if you had a chance to read some of them yet.
Only scanning a couple now, just picking it up now. So yeah, the deep links for me was a real win, because it meant that everything that the students were doing in Moodle could be directly linked to resources that we were hosting on Mahara, simply because Mahara is so much better at displaying video-rich materials and images and things like that. So all the case study scenarios, we could have lab reports from the animals, pictures of the animals, videos. You could have audio of the animal's heart and things like that. To do that in Moodle would be incredibly awkward and laborious, but it's easy just to drop all the resources in and arrange them nicely in Mahara, so it looks quite slick. So that for us was a huge bonus in terms of how we would use the two sites together.
So Yvonne asked how you add the students to groups.
Right, okay, that's a really good question. What I did was, when I looked at the setup on Mahara, because we had so many resources, I was faced with the option of getting the students to join about 40 or 50 different groups, which would be an absolute nightmare. So what I did instead was I got all of the students to join one student year group, and then I gave that group permission to view everything. And it meant that as long as the students joined that one group, they were allowed to see all of the other groups.
So they had to join the group themselves? Yes,
they were sent that as a task within within an induction module. So one of the very first things that they do when they arrive is they're taken through an induction, and we have a series of key tasks for them. And one of them is they click on a link that takes them into Mahara, and then they're told click on the request to join button. And then I would have gotten an email as the administrator of the group, and I would just approve all the students coming in. So that meant that all of our students, within a couple of days of arrival at the institution, had access to all of the resources that we had spread out across 40 or 50 different groups. And it was far easier than trying to track down why one individual student didn't have access to one particular group, because I could see at a glance 140 people have added themselves into the group, therefore one person's missing. And we could track who it was.
Okay, there's a few more questions. I'll let you read and respond.
Let's see. Apologies if I miss anything on the way. I'm just trying to scroll up and down.
So Kelly asked, how does it work on mobile, on the mobile app?
It works absolutely fine because, well, actually, I say it works absolutely fine. I've not tried it on the mobile app, but it is just a hyperlink. And as long as you're signed into Moodle, it's using, for those of you who are used to having a block on the side of your Moodle page with the link into Mahara, it's just a customized version of that link. So it's using the single sign-on protocol that takes you from Moodle into Mahara, but this time it's actually taking it a step further and saying, but I also want you to go to this particular page in Mahara. And the details for how to do that are actually in the Mahara manual online. So that they've been in there for 4 or 5 years now.
1610, I think. I shared the link not long ago. If people scroll up, you can find it. I'll reshare it here as well.
So it's a very successful way of doing it, and it really engaged the vet school, transformed from being a place where you dump your lecture notes into Moodle to actually a very vibrant blended learning environment where the students got to do a lot of self-directed content, got to do a lot of flipped materials, simply because it was so much easier to present it in Mahara as a resource bank, where the students could actually pick the individual things they wanted to look at, and we could target exactly where we were going to send them to from a particular Moodle course.
Here's one more question from Lisa. So when you say we, did you get buy-in across the whole program team, and how difficult was that to involve everyone in this process? They're seeing modular activity rather than programmatic.
Sure. There was a lot of buy-in. That there were inevitably a few people who resisted, but when they saw that everyone else was really getting on board, it became difficult for individuals to continue resisting it, because we would constantly go on about this bank of resources that we have, and we'll say, but there's obviously a glaring gap where none of your content is there. So,
so shame them
what I did. Yeah, what I did was every year I was fortunate enough to get a couple of students to work with me as interns over the summer, and they would go around filming activities. They would get a member of staff to demonstrate a practical technique, and then they would come back and edit it, and we'd put it in as part of our resource bank. So at the start of every summer, I would say to the staff, what do you need to deliver for next year? What videos do you need? What areas are students struggling with that would benefit from having something developed, and whether that's a video or whether it's a Moodle quiz or whatever. And then we got a lot of buy-in from staff, realising that we could take the pressure off them, because there are things that they have to say to every group of half a dozen students, so they might have to deliver the same session 40 times. If we could do it once really well on a video, and then all the students got to see it, then it made a big difference to their workload, and it meant they didn't need to remember what they hadn't said every single time. So we got a lot of buy-in across the board once it started rolling out and people really saw the benefits of it. And you also found that the students, once they started seeing what they had in first and second year, if that wasn't there in third year, they would start clamouring about it. So there was no way people could resist for long.
Lisa, to borrow Gordon, just borrow him and get him to speak to your academics. So there's Teresa and Lisa just typing. I don't know if it's a question or a comment, or I mean, Lisa, you can check your mic on.
We will assimilate. I mean, I make that sound blasé as if we didn't have any problems. But there were, obviously, with every single institution, there would be people with a strong mindset to say, this is how I do things, this is how I've always done it. But the winds of change were definitely with us, that the students really got the benefit of it, the vast majority of staff really got the benefit of it. So it became increasingly difficult for people to hold out and say, I don't want to do it that way, because everybody else was getting on board. And nobody wanted to be left behind, because if everyone else was getting the attention, say, so-and-so developed a video that showed me how to do this fantastic technique, what do you do? It becomes an ego thing. So they want to be on the videos as well, because they want to be the star.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much, and lovely to have you back in the community. We've missed you.
I'm back.
You're back. Okay, so again, thank you very much, Gordon, and I am now going to hand over to